Recently, I was discussing with a few friends some historically insensitive adverts that have slogans or, the entire advert that just doesn't really fit well with history and has very other connotations if you know the details of the past rather well. So in this video, and I've not created this to offend anyone or endorse anything in this video, simply to share with you some historically insensitive adverts. So the first one, and this, I don't even think this was a real advert, I think this was literally Top Gear having a fool around, which if you don't know is a program on British television, or was until they got rid of Jeremy Clarkson, with the advert of Berlin to Warsaw in one tank, which if you know any history at all, you'll realise spawned plenty of memes about Berlin to Warsaw in one tank, because half a century ago that meant something really quite different and had a very different connotation, of course, with the Second World War going along there with the various attacks of the Germans to Warsaw, which indeed did see many panzer divisions moving across the Polish border, that kind of thing. So that really wasn't the best idea. But again, as I don't think that was a genuine Volkswagen advert. I think that was Top Gear fooling around, but still, it's a good laugh at the end of the day, and quite a historically insensitive one. Now this next one was one that was done by Nike. They came up with a new brand of trainers, which are these ones, and they called the range rather silly the Black and Tans range, with the slogan, "Get the Black and Tans look." Now you may think that's harmless enough, but then again, the Black and Tans were the British paramilitary troops who were around after the Easter Rising of Ireland and were incredibly brutal and were involved in many atrocities against the native Irish population in the quest to subdue the Irish War of Independence from 1919 to 1922, and has incredibly bitter memories in Ireland at the moment. So really that wasn't the best choice of words to use, especially because they released it around St. Patrick's Day, and they did change the name in the end because this did offend many people whose families had been affected by the Black and Tans. But it goes to show that even a name like that, if you know your history, you wouldn't fall into that kind of trap. So the next one, this one really doesn't need that much explanation. It's a bit of a shot in the foot by Nivea there with the white is purity advert. It's really quite bad. And this one, the Coke one, I remember, or Pepsi rather, I remember everyone got very annoyed about this Pepsi advert because it was all about some protest going on, and then Kendall Jenner walks over to the policeman, hands him a can of Pepsi, and everything is fine, which of course spawned plenty of historical memes as well. I particularly like the end one there at the Antifa rally where the guy walks up with a can of Pepsi trying to calm everyone down, because it simply doesn't work. But it was a funny idea, I guess, in the end. This one, actually a Dutch one, getting some representation. Even the image on the advert offended quite a lot of people, and then the slogan "White is coming" definitely didn't make it sound like it was the scramble for Africa or anything like that to do with slavery. So probably not the best choice of words once again on this advertising slogan, which of course rustled many jimmies, and it was pulled after a while. It was Sony, who makes PlayStation. It was a PlayStation Portable advert with a bad slogan, and maybe not the best choice of picture either with that slogan, but Now this one does take a bit more explaining. We're like a cult with better KoolAid to die for. So it may seem harmless enough, but if you know the history behind this, then there is a more sinister side, and that is that Jim Jones was a pastor in America in the late 1960s, 1970s, who set up a cult, and he actually did go, and he believed, his ideology was that socialism was the way forward, which, there were plenty of people who believed that in the 1970s, but then he also believed that Jesus was a communist, and that the way to Jesus and the thing that Jesus endorsed was also communism, so kind of really mixing two ideas which were quite far apart, seeing as most communists were ardent atheists and against the power of the church. But he then had a coup following, and they bought land in Guyana, which is in the north of South America, a remote place, and he had armed guards around this encampment, essentially, that it was where his followers were, and there were abuses that happened there, and the American Congress learned about it, and they sent Congressman Leo Ryan down to essentially go down and see what was happening. Several people tried to escape with Congressman Ryan, but then he had them shot as they were boarding an airplane, and soon after this they committed mass suicide. It's really quite a tragic story, by spiking the drink of fruit punch that was the KoolAid with cyanide and I think laxatives or something else they put in. And, you know, almost 1,000 people committed mass suicides, and they were, you know, a lot of them were forced into it by these armed guards. So that's where you get the phrase in English you may have heard, sipping the Kool-Aid, is, you know, being indoctrinated, that kind of thing, or, you know, something more sinister like that. So that's where the advert comes down to, which is really quite grim. So I don't know why I particularly made this video. It's not a very serious one, so I'll have another video up this week, but I thought it's interesting to look at how some advertising companies are so unaware of history at all that they make such slogans, or some of them probably knew what they were doing. I think the Kool-Aid one is definitely not innocent, but you know, it just goes to show that having a good knowledge of history will avoid some sticky situations. Some of these are quite funny, others are a bit more sinister, but I hope you've enjoyed this video anyway. So I have been History with Hilbert, and this has been a bit of a random video about insensitive historical advertisement.